We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies, Mr. Beale. The world is a business, Mr. Beale.
Go on without me. Just go.
A good soldier never leaves a man behind.
Because I wouldn't give you 2 cents for all your fancy rules if behind them they didn't have a little bit of plain, ordinary, everyday kindness.
Life, finds a way.
Hey guys, Nelson here. Just want to check in before the recording. We put a lot of work into this show, and we've been slowly improving audio quality over time, both with hardware upgrades and software upgrades, thanks to our subscribers over on Patreon. But this particular episode, I don't know what happened. I really messed up, and the audio quality for Jeff and I is pretty brutal. But I've cleaned it up a lot. I'm going to include here a clip here so you can hear what it was like before.
So as we do with all of our guests, we got a couple questions we'd like to ask you just so our listeners can get to know you a little bit. And
And I've cleaned it up a lot, but it's not up to our normal level. So I just want to apologize before you get into the show. With that, here we go.
Welcome to Silver Screen Biases. Each week we pick a movie off of IMDb's top 250 and dig into it. We're examining truth claims in critically acclaimed movies while also examining our own biases. I'm Nelson.
This is Jeff.
And this week,
Fight Club.
With guest Zach Arnesti of the Mortals and Portals podcast. This episode is brought to you by our community on Patreon. They make the show happen and you can help. Links to our Patreon and merchandise are in the show notes. Now back to the show. Zach, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, hang out with you guys, talk about a really great movie. Looking forward to it.
So that means there's at least one of us that likes this movie. Good.
Don't wait, hold on. I know we're going to cover this, but you don't like the movie? It's ridiculous.
I knew that Jeff was not going to like this movie.
You're supposed to like cult classics like by default. Like if you don't like them, there's something wrong with you. You know what I mean? So we'll get into
like The Room, for example.
It wasn't the worst movie we've watched. Right? Yeah, we'll break it all down. I definitely have thoughts. First of all, Zach, let's get into this a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and before we get into our interview questions, just
sure. I guess I'll give you like just a brief synopsis. I was born and raised in Nebraska. Had a pretty normal childhood. I just loved movies. That pretty much like drove my imagination. So like I was into all that dirty stuff, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, all that stuff. And then right out of high school, I joined the Marine Corps. Spent 4 years on active duty, which is a lot of this Fight Club. Like it makes me think of that time in my life. So I'll definitely want to touch on that a bit. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I moved to Illinois because I just started dating my now wife, and we went to school together, graduated, moved back to Nebraska, got my master's degree in business administration. We got married. I can't remember if I said that or not. We got married at some point. Don't worry about it. Yeah, and then just recently, we moved to Texas.
Tax avoidance, I assume?
Yes, tax avoidance, because I just recently started a business as well in software and development, and just, very business-friendly place.
Yeah.
And that's where I am right now. No kids currently, but I do have a border collie dog and love her to death. So if you hear her at any point on this recording, I'm sorry. She hasn't eaten her dinner yet. So she might be making...
She's welcome to the show.
Yeah. We'll have her on for Lassie.
So as we do with all of our guests, we got a couple questions we'd like to ask you just so our listeners can get to know you a little bit and kind of give them an idea of where you're coming from with the topics that we discuss on this show, or may discuss on this show. So first of all, Zach, what's your political biases? How would you describe yourself when it comes to political, governmental, anything in that category?
Yeah, for sure. I'm very hands off with that. Like I'm not super invested in it. I don't follow it very closely. Anytime I start talking about politics, I get frustrated. I'm sure as Nelson's seen in the little bit of conversations we've had about it. I think if I had to, pick one category, I'd certainly say conservative, as you might expect from ex-military, just business, things like that. But I don't like politics. I'm not a huge fan of politicians. I don't really think they have our best interests in heart most of the time. So I just kind of try my best to stay out of that. And then, that's pretty much all I have to say about that.
I openly acknowledge too that my love of politics is weird and gross.
No, I kind of envy it. I envy people that can really know what's going on in the world. But I just kind of the more I learn about what's going on, the more frustrating it is. You know what I mean?
I'm the same way. You're literally describing my opinion about politics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then Jeff and I also have a mutual friend who for example, if you had asked him, what do you think about what's happening in Israel? He would say, what's happening in Israel? And I envy that level of unaware of current events. Like, I think that's insane.
Yeah.
And it must be nice.
Yeah, I'm a little bit in the middle. And it's one of those things where I never know enough of what's going on to feel confidently to like speak on it.
Yeah. Never let a lack of knowledge stop you from having an opinion.
Always double down. I've heard that before.
Always double down. Yeah.
Just run with it. How would you describe yourself when it comes to your religious biases?
Yeah, I was born and raised Christian. I had kind of a period in my life when I was in the Marine Corps where my faith like wasn't like, if you would have asked me, I would have absolutely said I was Christian, but it just wasn't a huge part of my life, which is actually like, again, this movie is like more where I relate to is that part of my life, because now it's obviously, it's the center of my life. It's just always at the forefront of my mind. So yeah, I'm Christian, more specifically Baptist. Yeah.
All right. And last but not least, what's your favorite movies? How would you describe yourself when it comes to the big screen?
Yeah, so kind of like as I said when I was just talking about like my childhood and stuff, I just love all that nerdy stuff. I love Star Wars. I don't love current Star Wars. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I do love Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. Like I love classic heroes, adventures. I love big scale battles, but I also like very grounded films. I know you guys always say, what is it, biopics?
Biopic.
Right, biopic. I guess this isn't technically or is it a biopic? Biopic's about one person. I don't know. I just saw Killers of the Flower Moon with Leonardo DiCaprio.
How is that? I haven't got to it yet.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that movie as well. So just like, I like Star Wars and I like this 3.5 hour movie telling this very true, gritty tale about, Native American history and just the exploitation going on there. And it's just one of those things like, wow, I had no idea. It's kind of like politics. We're like, wow, the more I understand about what's going on, the more sad I become. So
are we the baddies?
Yeah. Wait, are we the bad guys? Yeah.
Just real quick, shooting from the hip, on a binary scale of best movie ever, worst movie ever, Killers of the Flower Moon, what do you rate it?
Oh, okay. So a big part of like how I rate movies is rewatchability.
Okay.
And I don't think I'll ever watch the movie again simply because it's so long, and I did like receive the message it was telling. And it's not necessarily something you enjoy because it's so like, it just doesn't make you feel good.
Beats you to the ground.
But at the same time, I really respected, because when I'm watching nonfiction movies, the very first thing I do after I see it is I Google how much of that was real. Because I hate when you watch like this historical movie and you're like, yeah, they made that up. Right. And apparently it's like very true to the actual events. And it is based on a book that's also retelling the exact same events. So for that, I give it a lot of points. It's got Leonardo DiCaprio acting up a storm. It's got, what's his name?
Robert De Niro.
Robert De Niro, thank you. Yeah, they're doing great. So I think overall, I'd probably give it like, a 7 maybe. But I don't necessarily feel compelled to watch it.
That's the best movie ever.
Yes. Yeah,
7?
That's such a good number.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's a binary scale.
Yeah.
Binary.
It's best movie ever. Yeah. It's either best movie ever or worst movie ever.
Oh.
So.
Okay, well then I guess I'd have to say best movie. It's definitely not the worst movie ever. Because again, it's not modern Star Wars.
All right.
That counts. All right. Well, thank you for answering those. I have a feeling.
Great episode. Thank you for coming.
Oh yeah, this is easy. Why did I watch Fight Club?
I have a feeling we'll get to know a little bit more about you throughout the episode as well.
Yeah.
But let's talk about this movie for a little bit. Let's talk some stats. Fight Club, 1999.
That's right.
2 hours and 19 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Directed by David Fincher. This is our second David Fincher movie.
That's right, and not our last, I think.
Well, it's our last for tonight.
Yeah, I only watched that movie.
Yeah. This is the only movie we're doing tonight. But David Fincher has a pretty big repertoire. He's actually done, if you look at
nice word.
Thank you. I don't
How do you spell it?
If you look on his IMDb rap sheet, it lists a number of music videos that he's done. I don't think we talked about this last movie. But
Scorsese's done a bunch of music videos too, by the way.
But yeah, he's done many music videos. He's done a couple TV shows from Mindhunter, House of Cards, Love, Death, and Robots. Like he's got a nice TV record as well too. So, but Alien 3, Panic Room, Zodiac, Benjamin Button, Social Network, Dragon Tattoo, Gone Girl, The Killers, which is the newest movie he's done.
The Killer, singular. Yeah, that's great.
Not the biopic of the band The Killers.
Yeah, and then the one that we still have yet to do of his is Gone Girl.
Gone Girl.
2014. So.
Yeah. So there's that. That's the director. And this movie is rated R. This movie came out in 1999, like I stated. we've only done, besides doing 7, which came out after this movie.
After this? Before, it was 90s.
Before?
Has to have been.
I always thought that this was Brad Pitt's big breakout role.
7 was 95. This Fight Club's 99.
When we did 7, I learned that 7 was actually his first role where people were like, oh, he's not just a comedy actor.
Right.
And I never even think of him as comedy, but apparently, like, before 95, that's all he did.
Yeah. The only movie we've done that's around the 99 time is 1998 Saving Private Ryan. Not related at all to David Fincher, but just setting up that chronologically of released movies that we've done episodes of. This movie came out a year after Saving Private Ryan that we've reviewed recently. Nelson, is this movie based on a book?
So this is based on the book Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. I had to look up how to pronounce his name. Released in 1996. It takes some kind of big departures from the book, but a lot of his monologuing is exact quotes right from the book. The ending of the movie is pretty different from the book, though. In the book, the narrator, which is the name of the protagonist, ends up in a mental institution, and it's implied that he will continue his fight against quote-unquote society. In the film, though, as you know if you've seen it, it's a little more ambiguous. Buildings collapse. He's shot himself in the throat, but seems to be surviving it. And Marla is holding his hands. There is a sequel and trilogy.
To the book?
To the books.
Okay.
That have not been adapted. The sequel was done through a series of comics, and so was the trilogy. And these only came out, like, in the last decade or so. He waited a long time. He never wanted to do a follow-up. Fight Club 2 is set 10 years after the ending of Fight Club, and it's told from the restrained perspective of Tyler Durden as he sits in the subconscious of Sebastian, which is the name of the narrator. Sebastian continues his dysfunctional relationship with Marla and has fallen into the mundane routine of society until Tyler reemerges to cause chaos. So they've been together in this dysfunctional relationship for 10 years now. And then the trilogy, the third comic book series, Marla is about to deliver her second child, but the father isn't her husband, it's Tyler Durden, who is very interested in his heir and the world he'll inherit. Marla's first son and her husband, the narrator Sebastian, who now goes by Balthazar, live in a rundown motel with sketchy neighbors.
Love that.
In the Fight Club 2 series, Tyler transforms Project Mayhem into Rise or Die. Rise is spelled with a Z. Super edgy.
Sounds like an album.
Yeah, it sounds like a bad album. And now as a road to paradise presents itself, a new group has implemented a ruthless and deviant plan to fine-tune mankind, leading Balthazar to forge an unlikely alliance with ellipsis Tyler Durden.
Dum dum dum.
So it sounds like the second and third are pretty bad.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I mean, I've only seen the movie, but it just doesn't feel like it needs anything else. It's perfect as it is. And I was going to ask about that too, like knowing that you had read the book, because I imagined the decision to use a narrator.
I'm kind of illiterate. I listened to the book.
Oh, sorry. Okay, that makes way more sense. I'm like, who reads books? It's like, this guy's insane. When I was watching the movie, I was like, okay, so they have a narrator. That's probably because to convey all the information that's in the book from his perspective, there's no other way to tell it.
Yeah.
And I feel like pulling off a narrator is kind of hard, and they did a really great job with this one without it being corny.
So this was Chuck Palahniuk's first book. He was a journalist, and this was his first attempt at writing a book. And it's fine. It's really just fine as a book. David Fincher in the 90s was like really like edgelord nihilist. You can see that in 7. You see that in this one. And then in The Killer is very much like a contemplative, narrator-driven movie about a nihilist. But that one's like almost spoofing his earlier work, or at least like meta jokes about it, without being a comedy. It's still very much a gritty crime movie, but it seems like now Fincher's a little bit more self-aware of the nihilism of his youth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A little bit more angst in your youth, you know?
Yeah, which I think this movie does a really good job of kind of, I don't know, putting that in the capsule, you know?
Yeah, it does a job at it.
Oh, absolutely.
For sure.
The nihilism of youth.
Yeah. So some notable cast in this here movie. We've got the one and only Brad Pitt, played Tyler Durden. I don't really need to go through his rap sheet. He's, we all know who Brad Pitt is. Edward Norton, playing the narrator and the movie of which the other character we're seeing on screen, the perspective is we're watching, so he's the other main character, if not the only main character.
And he never does get that anger under control, and eventually it starts manifesting into giant green monsters.
It turns into, but then he loses it all.
It's the only true version of the Hulk the MCU ever did.
We've got Meatloaf.
Yeah. Are you familiar with
recently
Meatloaf?
passed away, Meatloaf, yes.
Meatloaf, yeah.
I've never seen him in a movie before, but
I think this might be the only one.
No.
Jared Leto's in here too, another musician. It was jarring when I saw him.
When I saw that Jared Leto was going to be in this, or I don't know how to pronounce it, Jared Leto, I was like, that's wild. Was he acting that early? And then I looked it up and he'd been acting for like a decade.
Yeah, wasn't American Psycho before this? That's that's the earliest.
Yeah,
movie.
he's in American Psycho, but there was movies where he was the lead, like a decade before this. And then I was looking at a current picture of him, and he's nearly 60 and looks younger than me.
Exactly the same. Yeah.
Man, I hate that guy.
He's almost 60 years old.
Yeah, and I've decided now that I don't like him.
Jared Leto just recently climbed the Empire State Building, so there's that.
Yeah,
did it to announce a world tour. Helena Bonham Carter.
Yeah.
She's wonderful. And I think outside of the Harry Potter franchise, this is the only other movie I've seen that she's been that Johnny Depp's not in with.
Okay, I was going to say. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
she's
a wonderful actress. And I'll get to my opinion about
Brad Pitt is basically Johnny Depp if you take away all that angst and weirdness.
I thought she did a great job, despite my feelings about this movie in general. I liked her character. She's really good at doing those dark, lifeless types of characters, but then you still feel sympathy for. I've always thought she was great. I've seen a lot of the movies that she's done. Not all. I've seen a lot of the ones. Mostly because they're all Johnny Depp movies. I've seen a lot of his stuff. And the last one, which we talked about, was Jared Leto.
Yeah.
Jared Leto's in this movie. Those are the cast members that I reckon. Is there any other cast members that either of you think are notable that's worth mentioning?
I did think it was interesting that there's a single black man in the entire movie.
Yeah, I kind of noticed that at some point as well too, because at one point everyone that was a part of his group was looked exactly the same, and it was when they were panning through the house. So it's they all looked like the most generic white person ever. And then right towards the end, there was a Hispanic person and then maybe a black person. But earlier when they were in the basement fighting, I thought there was more diversity. But yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that there was it was only white guys until
that took me a while.
Edward Norton gets the snot beaten out of him by a black guy. And the guy's next week, he's maybe next month. I was that's the first black guy I think I've seen in this whole movie.
I was going to say Helena's the only female, but there are females when he goes to the addict centers.
Yeah.
But it's very much a male-driven.
Chloe.
Oh yeah,
which I think is.
I
think that's appropriate. I don't think that women experience this nihilist angst, especially Gen X women, did the same way men did. So I think it makes sense that this is a male-focused story.
Mm. Okay, cool.
Well, I'm not going to speak to the black experience, but I know that for white guys specifically, this is a relatable thing.
Yeah, and I did notice, I thought a theme of the movie was kind of him having an unhealthy relationship with women, so I think that's maybe why they only had one pivotal character that was a woman, so they could kind of, focus that story, because it seems more intentional when there's only one, and it seems like there's more story they're trying to tell there.
And also, let's be honest, how many women do you really need to tell a good story?
Yeah, my wife's perfectly fine with any Pixar movie. That's all she needs. Although she's watched Fight Club and did actually really like it, so who knows?
Yeah.
I recently, and I haven't done the research on this, but my wife and I recently went to a comedy show. It was a great show. Angela Johnson, she's wonderful, and she was talking. She kind of did some behind this. She did a joke. And then kind of broke the third wall of her set a little bit. The fourth wall. No, there was only 3 walls there.
2 walls.
Yeah, she's
standing in the corner.
She stands in the corner, and then she talked about how, in joke writing, there's this rule, or in story writing in general, there's this rule of 3s. Mm-hmm. And she talked about how, because on Instagram she's known to have a dog, but she was telling the story of her husband, and the neighbor, about them running because they just recently moved to Tennessee and there's a tornado. Long story short, and someone was like, "Where's your dog?" And she's like, "Well, in the rule of storytelling, I have to keep it to 3 people, so I didn't talk about my dog. But yes, my dog was there too." So all that to say, I didn't know that was a thing. I've never wrote a story. I've never gotten into creative writing and stuff, but it is something that now that I heard her say that, and I'm watching movies, iconic movies like Twilight, Harry Potter. There's other ones that I can't think of off the top of my head. Like I've never really noticed that rule of three.
Yeah.
And in this movie, it had it.
When Avengers came out, one of the things that it was praised for is how it balanced so well more than three characters. And that's hard to do. Even like in an ensemble cast type thing, typically what you'll end up with is with three main characters and some periphery characters.
Can I just add one thing to that Avengers statement?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think two great things to compare. And I know, Jeff, I think you really like Justice League. I thought I heard that in one of your episodes. But if you compare Justice League and Avengers, each hero that appeared in Avengers got their own solo movie first. So, like, I think the big reason they do the rule of three is because it's hard to do character development with, like, too many characters.
Yeah.
But if they each get their own movie first, then you see them in the Avengers setting, then you know what their traits are, and watching them interact is fun. But in Justice League, like, none of them got a solo movie, and then you're just getting to know them at the same time you're seeing them interact. So a lot of those interactions, like, aren't as important. So I think, like, now that you pointed out the pivotal cast,
you're not wrong at all. I like the Justice League for multiple reasons, but I also put a lot of hope in it because I wanted it to continue.
Yeah.
So for me, like, I had to like these films because I wanted them to win. I will say there are faults. Marvel, especially the first phase or a couple phases of Marvel did it really well. And Marvel definitely, I think, has higher marks the earlier Marvel has higher marks when it comes to what DC's doing. But in general, I think that's a great point. And see, like, but also on that on the flip side, I've never wrote a movie, but like, I can imagine if you're on the other side of the superhero coin, you're on the DC side. I think the last thing you want to do is recreate the model that someone else is doing. DC was really in a lose-lose position because they either do exactly what Marvel did, do all the movies beforehand and do a big collection, which worked for Marvel, and it could have worked for DC, but then everyone would just be comparing it, which they're going to do anyway. Or they flip it and try to break it down the opposite way, try something new, be inventive, do what's different, and it not quite work. So I don't blame them for doing it the way they did, but I think you're absolutely right. I think what hurt the Justice League is we got 6 characters, 2 of which we've only had screen time. Well, 3 we only had screen time with for a little bit, and it struggled for them to come together. I agree with that.
I think they wanted to do what Marvel did. They were just too slow because I remember there was like a 3-year gap after Man of Steel, and then they just thought they're going to miss the mark, so they just pushed out Justice League. But now James Gunn's at the helm; he'll figure it out.
I'm hopeful with that. I hate that he wiped the slate clean.
I really liked the second Suicide Squad and Peacemaker.
Guardians of the Galaxy, he's incredible.
Yeah,
like the Guardians of the Galaxy 3 especially. Probably the best movie of the most recent Marvel movies.
I haven't seen it.
I recommend it. It's great. It's emotional. Like
I got halfway through Quantumania and I haven't caught up with anything.
I also liked Quantumania because again I'm a movie liker and I couldn't find stuff.
We both have.
But James Gunn, Guardians of the Galaxy was way better. I will argue that.
He definitely understands characters better.
Yeah, I thought Peacemaker was great. I did like the second Suicide Squad. I hate that we have to continually restart DC.
Yeah. And there's like the side movies like Joker, which is great, but has nothing to do with the DCU. And like fans are easily
Robert
confused.
Pattinson's Batman. Yeah, and they're starting a whole universe with that Batman. So like they're doing a Penguin HBO Max show. So it's just there's no consistency. Colin Farrell's going to be Penguin again. Yeah, nice. There's already a teaser out for it.
I will say, as a comic book fan who vastly prefers Marvel to DC. Like, the constant reboots, like, that's just par for the course. That's what DC does.
You're not wrong.
I know DC has better animated content from what I've heard.
That's true. That's fair.
I just think Marvel has more grounded heroes. DC's heroes' power levels are absurd. Sorry, I don't want to take up too much time talking about the comic book stuff.
We've got superhero movies in the top 250. We'll eventually get to.
Yeah. I think the big thing...
DC and
Marvel's got the better heroes. DC has the better villains.
Yeah. Joker,
absolutely. I mean, a lot of that's because of Batman.
Joaquin Phoenix Joker's in the top 250 too.
Yeah,
Joker's fantastic.
Anyway, let's continue with some of these stats here. And on the IMDb scale, this is 8.8 out of 10. Currently, as this episode is being recorded, it's ranked number 12 on the IMDb top 250. Not too shabby. That's very high. History of this movie on the top 250.
Yeah. So in 1999, it debuted at 26. So it was crushing from day one. It fell to 43 by March of 2004. So debuts high, slowly fell. And then, since then, it climbed and climbed and climbed. Its peak was 9th in September 2013, but it's hovered in that top 10 range since then.
Okay. Rotten Tomatoes, 79%.
There's man, Rotten Tomatoes.
I found that
Was
weird.
that the critic score?
That's the critics.
Oh, okay.
score.
Yeah.
You think that makes sense? Okay.
I do think that makes sense.
Okay. Like, I figured it would be higher to be number 12 on the IMDb Top 250.
I'd wager.
79 is still good. It's still a full bucket.
Yeah.
Or a fresh tomato.
I don't know where to find, like, history of Rotten Tomatoes. I should find that out, where I can look at history of Rotten Tomatoes scores. I would wager that it's fallen in the last 5 to 10 years because of knee-jerk criticism of toxic masculinity, which this movie is not endorsing.
Right.
But
it actually shows the
pitfalls of it. It's kind of trying to, like, digest it and say, where does this come from?
Right.
Right.
96% audience, though. So the audience is very clearly into this.
Yeah.
I do want to say, like, and we've talked about a little bit of patterns before in different movies.
Yeah.
David Fincher, this movie, 1999.
Yeah.
He just released a movie this year.
Yeah.
Was there a spike within the past 12 months of this movie on the top 250?
That's a great question. Let me pull that up.
Like, did having a new David Fincher movie come out change the ranking of this movie recently?
I'm always surprised by some of the movies that are in the IMDb Top 250.
Yeah.
You're like, really?
Oh, it's an absolute crapshoot.
Yeah.
It's an absolute crapshoot. There's no consistency. No, there doesn't seem to be any. Yeah.
Spike rating. Okay.
No.
I was just curious.
A lot of times we will see that.
Yeah.
You know, like every time a new
Is the
Jurassic
criteria
Park
for
movie.
that? Is that like, how does it get up there?
So they take the amount of reviews, and there's a minimum of 2,500, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a big
I
number.
think it was 250,000 at least.
Yeah, you're right. It was 2.5 something and then a bunch of zeros. Anyway, you have to have at least that, and then if you have a ton of reviews, that helps. The reviews have to be over 7. That's the minimum threshold to count. Like anything under a 7 average, you're not going to make it in the top 250.
And for the people that are rating it, for their rating to count, they have to be consistently someone who rates movies.
That's not necessarily true.
Oh,
they have to
really?
be a quote-unquote approved user. And IMDb is very cagey about what that means.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of...
love cagey.
A lot of bots.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of like conspiracy theory that what that means is from North America.
Okay.
Because North American movies tend to do a whole lot better. You'll see Bollywood movies pop onto the top 250 for a little bit and then disappear right away.
Bollywood movies are a good time, man.
Yeah,
they're awesome.
They're a lot of fun.
Nelson, what do we got for budget on this movie?
$63 million in 1999, which is $116 million today. Zach, are you familiar with what causes inflation? I need a soapbox real quick.
Just in the sense
It's
that
money printing.
Oh, money. Well, yeah, money
Go
printing and the market demands growth. You know, things continue over time, but yeah, mostly just printing off money. Let's all just switch to Bitcoin. You know, that's a finite supply. Let's do it.
El Salvador did it, and
yeah, how'd that work?
Mixed rocky results early on, and people were like, "See, this is why it doesn't work." But man, did it steady out? You haven't heard a lot about it lately, and that's because it's working well.
Peanut gallery news? Anything
gallery.
from the Patreon subscribers?
Yes. So first of all, 100% of respondents to our poll said no, not in their top 250.
Smart people.
However, finally, we have actual feedback on the movie that we can read.
Get out of here.
I know.
No, seriously, get out.
Hold on. Sorry, just because I'm new to this, so that all of your patrons voted that this is not a top 250 movie.
Well, all of them that chose to vote
Correct.
Okay.
voted that it's not.
All the patrons that have an opportunity to vote.
We've been very unclear in the past of how many people have voted on a given poll. So this one, I'll be honest, 100% of respondents means one guy.
okay. I'm like, what are we doing with? Hey, I have a Patreon. I know how the polls go, man. Sometimes people don't look at it.
We would love for that to grow.
Yeah, engage, guys. Let's go.
But one person, I believe it's the same person that said not in their top 250, they wrote, I love David Fincher. And Fight Club was certainly unique at the time, but it sort of suffers from a style over substance issue, in my opinion. The dialogue reads like it was written by a high school student who just read Kerouac for the first time and is consciously attempting to be nonconformist. But that's mostly just because Chuck Palahniuk kind of sucks as a writer. Fincher did an excellent job with the material, but the material itself is the issue. I don't dislike it, but I also don't love it, and it's definitely not in my top 250. The dialogue is just painfully self-indulgent.
And then did they list out all 250 of their favorite movies after that? So we did.
yeah, and this one was 251. So.
right.
All right, awesome. Well, let's dive into this movie. So let me just give you my reaction to this movie first time, and then we can kind of go around. I'm assuming both of you guys have seen this movie before. This was my second time watching it. I couldn't remember the twist. I knew there was a twist in it, but going into this movie, I was like, I barely remember the details. I remember soap, I remember being gritty, and I remember being bloody. That's all. I couldn't tell you any more details. So I was hoping, for me, it would be a fresh rewatch going into this. Very soon into the movie, I realized, oh yeah, the twist. I know. And I was right. It was confirmed. Edward Norton sees dead people. But
It turns out the soap is people.
Yeah. I want to like this movie. It's iconic.
Yeah.
I remember when this came out. I was 9 or 10 years old. And I remember, like, the older people that were in my life, the older youth in my life, were talking about this movie. So yeah, I do not like this movie. Not because the acting's bad, not because, like, I like the vibe of it. It's just, I have a hard time getting into movies that have dark feels, like vibes.
Yeah. You like Christopher Nolan's Batman.
Yeah, this is darker than that. like it is, like, this is gritty. This is oh, okay. Like, I appreciate this movie. Like, it's not like I hate it and I think it's trash and, like, the acting, like, I love all the actors, like, but the movie itself is just rough, which is what it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah.
So, like, I respect it for what it is. I don't like this movie. So that's my reaction. You guys have seen this before, I'm assuming. So I'm assuming you guys are pro Fight Club movie. What's you guys' takes?
You first, Zach.
So first of all, when I think of this movie, I think of like the channel TBS, because back in the day, TBS used to just play this movie constantly, and that's actually the first time I saw it when I was like a teenager.
Okay.
Just channel flipping, back when you used to watch movies on TVs with commercials and stuff like that. So I had seen like pieces of it like gradually over time, and then but I like the twist was never revealed, and then I finally sat down to watch it. Totally blew my mind. Hadn't watched it for like 10 years after that, and then I rewatched it today to get that fresh take. And I definitely get where you're coming from. Like, if you know the twist, the movie has less appeal. But I don't think it's necessarily fair to judge it for that fact. But like I said earlier, when I rate movies, I rate it for watchability or rewatchability.
Yeah.
And I would still say that this has some, because the first time you watch it, you don't know what you're supposed to be picking up on. You get the twist and then the reveal.
Yeah.
And then they kind of like do some flashbacks to show you what was really going on. But then when you watch it the second, third, fourth time, you pick up on like other little details. Like, for instance, this isn't verified, but I think Tyler never hands the narrator anything. Like, he never receives anything from him. I think he gives him stuff because he has the power to like visualize him like with other things. But like there's a part where he like wants to hand him a cigarette and he like says no and things like that. Like little details where you go through and rewatch it and you're like, oh, okay, like they're setting this up. It's like blatantly in your face. You're just not like picking up on it. So I really enjoy that aspect. And then I just thought it was like a creative movie. Maybe like the movie Memento or some other stuff where I just don't think there's a lot of movies that kind of tell the same style of story that this one does, at least not that I know of. So I think it has a lot of style, a unique story, and, great acting. I think Edward Norton does a fantastic job in this. He has that like great narrative voice where he sounds monotone, but like still interesting. He just sounds tired and beat down. And you got Brad Pitt just like full of energy, super suave, looking cool, wearing just like the most random clothes ever, but still looking fashionable and like, there's a lot of like
peak 90s.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. This movie is like the epitome of like 90s meets 2000s of just like the music and style and everything like that. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of iconic scenes in this movie that stand out to me. I'm sure we're going to be talking about them as we go through, but in general, I certainly like this movie a lot. I think it's great.
Good.
But you definitely need to be in a certain mindset when you watch it. It's not just like, I want to feel good, let me put on a movie.
Yeah. Nelson, what about you?
I think that the amount of nihilism, actually, I think one of the criticisms that we got from that peanut gallery is pretty on point, that it's style over substance in a lot of ways. The nihilism and the cynicism and angst is kind of very like, pat yourself on the back for like how awakened am I as an author for having this observation. But despite all that, I think it's very good still. And I think it's kind of like a window into your average 20-something, specifically Gen X, which I'm not. I'm millennial. But the characters are Gen X, the writer is Gen X, the director is Gen X, and it kind of like is this like window into that, what they were experiencing and feeling and the ways that they see the world. But you can kind of shift that to any 20-something, and it kind of still fits. That just like, I feel like I'm supposed to be doing something. I'm looking around the world around me, and like the world's not right. And if everybody just did things the way that I see things should be, then we'd be great, right? And
see, I didn't even necessarily. Sorry, is it alright if I cut you off?
No, you're fine.
I didn't necessarily.
So polite.
I didn't necessarily view it that way in terms of like my way is the right way and every other way is wrong. I just saw this movie as like anti everything to the point where it was contradicting itself in a way that I thought I perceived to be self aware. So I think the things that you can knock it for are things that it knows it's doing. Like, for instance, it's completely anti-authority, yet they create a militaristic, very authority-driven, like non-questioning to every single order you receive, like blindly to a fault style of organization where it basically became the thing it was like trying to destroy. So it just made its own version of it, and it just destroyed. All it did was destroy stuff. So I don't think it really had some kind of like message. I mean, there's that clear anti-marketing, anti-corporation that still holds true today. And like advertising's even more in your face nowadays. Like now they got data on you and they know like what you're going to click on, how long you looked at something, the things you're into before they show it to you. So that's even more relevant. Yeah, cookies. I got to use that Brave browser. No cookies, you know what I'm saying?
That's right.
Yeah, and then the anti-corporation.
You also get to skip YouTube ads.
Yeah. Well, didn't they just do something about that to change that? Like, it doesn't work anymore?
Yeah, but if you're on Brave, you probably you wouldn't have even noticed it because Brave was also skipping that.
Yeah, Brave's like way ahead of you, man.
It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. 3 steps ahead.
So, yeah, I don't know. I kind of just viewed this as a movie that's like anti-everything, even anti-itself in a way. And I think when you look at it that way, it's not like, some preachy message. It's like, this movie's just destroying everything. And clearly these characters are lost. They don't like get anything out of their approach, in my opinion.
Of course. Yeah. I don't think it's as self-aware, but I do think that it exposes a hypocrisy in their thinking, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
But if it is self-aware, like, good for them, because they, like, intentionally exposing that hypocrisy, but I think it's incidental.
Yeah, because, I mean, you can't make an organized group to take down another group without becoming a group yourself that has its own, like, rules and structure and beliefs. And, like, I don't know. So, to me, I'm just like, what an entertaining movie. so silly.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it absolutely captures the angst, I think, of...
of a 20-something male. Okay, let me talk about just the anarchism in this, as an anarchist.
Libertarian, I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so hard in the paint libertarian. I'm an anarcho-capitalist. Gotcha. I don't see any viable use for government. So Tyler Durden is a revolutionary anarchist, and within anarchism, he's a subset of anarchists called anarcho-primitivist. It's not that he thinks that there shouldn't be property rights, which would be like anarcho-communist, and it's not that he thinks that the market will solve everything, which would be anarcho-capitalist, more my camp. He's like, we need to wipe the slate entirely clean, go back to just like the basics. And he's living, or choosing to live, and forcing the narrator to live, in such a primitive circumstance that they are entirely homeless, but they're basically like living, like subsistence lifestyle. So the anarcho-primitive says, all these modern consumerist trappings that we have, we need to just get rid of them. Actually, probably the most well-known anarcho-primitivist would be Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber.
I don't recognize the name.
Pretty gay.
You know, within anarcho-communists, within anarcho-primitivists, probably even some ANCAP guys, there is that revolutionary aspect, which is like, the way to get there is by violently overthrowing the status quo. And there's a level of coercion involved there that I can't personally agree with, which is like, I'm so sure of my ideas that I'm going to force them on everybody by blowing up all the credit bureaus. So they are, in a sense, like, forcing their opinion on. Now, as far as like what you were saying about authority that can't be questioned and stuff, I see it a little bit differently. They're very decentralized, right? Because he's got them in every city. And whenever the narrator, who is Tyler Durden, asks questions, he's told by other people within the organization, first rule is we don't ask questions. So they're holding him accountable to rules that they've all agreed on. I don't think that they see him as a leader, but they do all respect him, if that makes sense.
You see him as an equal.
They see him as an equal. They all respect him, but like, hey, this is the rule that we all agreed to. We're going to hold you accountable to that same rule. We don't ask questions. So that's what I saw happening there.
But there must be like an authoritative chain of like who orchestrated like what they were going to do, like from Tyler Durden, narrator, whoever you want to say.
Yeah.
Because anytime they held him accountable, it's because he told them to do that prior. Like in the end where he's like, stop. They're like, no, you said you would say that and you told us not to. Like, you know, so he was still, in my eyes, like clearly in charge of everything. But you're right. They did have like that decentralized because they said like any city he went to, there was like a fight club that popped up. But I thought it was revealed that...
And he knew how to get there.
Yeah. I thought it was revealed that he had gone there and did that, like when he was in his insomniac state as Tyler Durden.
Yeah. So you are right. He was, as Tyler Durden, in his dissociative state, going to other places, starting new fight clubs. That's why he, the narrator, knew where to go when he got there. There is at least once kind of a throwaway line of like, oh no, this was our idea. Don't worry, we have it all taken care of. And I think that was Jared Leto's character said that. And I didn't write it down because it was a passive comment. And I'd have to go back and rewatch actually to confirm that. I do believe that there is a at least throwaway line saying like that kind of shows that not even Tyler Durden has full control, even though like it's kind of taken a life of its own. But apart from that, if that one thing that I'm saying I think I remember being true isn't true, then you're right. This is still just like structured hierarchy. And not all anarchists are opposed to hierarchy of all kinds, but a lot of them are.
It definitely gave me like military vibes in the sense that like when we went to boot camp, it's like they tell you it's all about tearing you down so they can build you up.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of like yelling, screaming, just shave your head. You just go by recruit. They don't even call you your name. It's just like, and then they can start to build upon that. And that's like what he did when he was recruiting people. They'd stand outside his door. He'd yell at him. He'd belittle them. They'd shave their head, whatever.
Yeah.
And then he would start to like instill his ideas on them or like build them up from that.
Yeah.
So to me, like they just thought of like military hierarchy where you can't question my orders because I need you to do them because timeliness is important and it's like not your concern. Like that's how I perceived it. But yeah, I definitely get what you're saying where it's kind of like decentralized as well.
Yeah, yeah. You get the impression as he's traveling around. I don't know. I think that in order for Tyler Durden to have had full control over all this, especially in 1999, where you don't have quick access to email, I think that, and actually he says it when he's in the police department too. Like they're decentralized.
Yeah. That's true.
He's
Yeah.
only got notes on
when he's confessing
on what his cell is doing. Yeah. And that's a weird kind of confession. It's like, hey, I think my alternate personality is planning a massive parade.
I just want to say that scene is where this almost became John Wick to me, where like, I don't know if you've seen John Wick, but like everyone's an assassin.
I've not seen a John Wick.
So in John Wick, it's this underground assassin organization. You see the first movie, it's like, oh, it's this little niche thing. And then like by the second, third, and fourth, you're like, oh, everyone in the world is an assassin.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way.
Yeah, you're like, oh, everyone's in Fight Club. We're like 4 of the cops in the room with him while he's being given his confession are also in Fight Club.
3/4 of the cops are in Project Mayhem specifically. Also, the weird thing with Project Mayhem, like they were really inconsistent about shaved heads.
That's true.
Half the recruits have shaved heads. Some of them had mohawks. Jared Leto's character still had all his hair.
And his yellow blonde eyebrows.
Yeah, that was weird.
So another one of the bigger things that's in here, we talked about the consumerism one. I think is one of the bigger ones.
Yeah.
But I think another one that comes up a lot with this is the toxic masculinity or the perspective of how masculinity can be toxic. I think this movie got that right.
Yeah.
Just some of the images and stuff, and just in the way this movie ends, and on how like the things we try to control, the rules we put in place, this box we built, or when I say we, I mean not me in general, but just this idea of masculinity. It's ending up starting to implode. Like, and it has these moments of like we're falling apart from the inside out because the rules we set for ourselves, the guidelines, these ideas.
You're talking about in the movie or in society?
In society.
Okay.
These ideas of what masculinity is. I saw a lot of that. Like in my 34 years, and not all of those have been conscious about what's been going on in my world. I've seen a shift in like what's it mean to be a man. You know, like growing up,
We've seen that shift several times.
Yeah. And I think this movie coming out in 1999, like, this idea was a little ahead of its time, because in 99, in the 90s, was when I was kind of in that whole, like, I gotta be strong, I gotta be tough, I've gotta be, don't cry, I gotta be able to take pain. Like, that was my idea of what masculinity was. It wasn't until I got older, it's like, you can cry, you can feel emotion, you can...
And there was also a pendulum swing with that, which is like, real men are sensitive. It's like, not all men experience sensitivity the same way.
It's not required. None of this is required.
Yeah.
This movie definitely doesn't glorify masculinity. It portrays this honesty about the emasculation of culture and stuff, and just like how it's not a healthy system of these standards that were being set at one time.
Do you think that masculinity, as Tyler Durden articulates it, is beneficial or detrimental to society and to manhood?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would definitely say that I don't think that Tyler Durden in really any way is like a model of like how you should act in pretty much like any capacity. I think he is a exaggerated caricature of like how men perceive themselves sometimes, like in their own mind.
Yeah. Have you known any Tyler Durden types in your life?
I mean, I think everyone like has a little bit of Tyler Durden in him. And again, like, the reason I relate to this movie so much, like, for my time in the Marine Corps, is because there's just so much angst, like, built up aggression, tension, because you're just being, like, not treated the best, like, all day. You're being yelled at, running around. You have very little say in what's going on. You're building yourself up physically. You're, like, lifting weights. You're, like, exercising. You're running. You're all young. You all think you're cool because you're in the Marine Corps. You're around guns, like, this and that. And there's just all this, like, who's alpha mentality, like, at all times. And it's all about hierarchy and, like, having people follow you and want to follow you and things like that. And, like, a scene in this movie that I, like, kind of always correlate is the scene when he, like, first meets Tyler and they go drinking and then they go outside and then Tyler's like, all right, you got to hit me.
Yeah.
So just kind of like a story. When I was in training, and like I said, we're all just like, man, we just have all this pent up energy. We're not even allowed to go anywhere. You got to like sign out in this book and get approval to go somewhere back. And like me and this guy were just sitting there talking and we're like, you ever like been in a fight? And then we're just like, no, not really. Like, there was a time when I was a kid where like my friend like punched me when we were like kind of wrestling. And then there's like a time where I like punched a friend again when we were wrestling, but it wasn't like we instantly were like, whoa, sorry, kind of thing. So we're both just like, nah, I haven't really been in a fight. And we're just sitting there and we're like, do you want to fight each other? And then the other person was like, yeah, let's do that. And we're like, all right. So we went down to it's like called the duty hut, and you go sign out, and then you like fill out this thing. And we said we were like going to the store to get something, and we just like went out behind the barracks, and we just kind of stood there, and we're like, all right, let's fight. And then we just started fighting each other and like punch each other and like all this stuff. And then he had taken ibuprofen that day, which is a blood thinner. And like kind of got his nose and he was like bleeding all over. So then we were like freaking out, and then we couldn't tell them we couldn't like tell the sergeant that that's what we were doing. So I'm like trying to sneak in and like get all
you're damaging military property at that point.
Yeah. And we like definitely shouldn't have been doing that. So it's this big stupid thing, but it was just like that's the kind of angst I see where like, so the narrator is just going about his daily life, getting like told what to do by his boss, hates what he does, like isn't getting fulfillment. He's just got all this pent up aggression.
Yeah.
Like, in the beginning where he's like going to all those therapy sessions so he can cry. Like he just wants that like emotional release, and then it'll like help him sleep. I mean, that's a little bit of a different emotion, I would say. But like he just, when he started fighting Tyler Durden or himself, he felt this relief and he was like laughing. He's like, wow, I want to do that again. So it's just that like release of like that pent up energy you have like in testosterone, like as a man when everyone's like putting you down. I don't know exactly where I was going with that, but I just think that's something that any man probably at one point in their life has experienced. I mean, not to speak for all men, but I just think that's something that kind of happens.
Yeah, I think most, if not all men, have this like need to test their strength, to test themselves and push themselves. And combat sports are a great way to do that.
Yeah.
And I remember in high school, there was a fight club that got started. There was very much a time.
Around what year?
2010.
Like, okay. It's like I was curious, like, how did this movie have influence?
Yeah, I graduated in 2010. I don't know what year it was started. but I know that it ran for a while, and it was just like upperclassmen. There was a guy in my graduating class too that like was the epitome of Tyler Durden. Like, I remember the first time I watched Fight Club, I was like, oh, this is Tim. Just this menace to society that just was an absolute lunatic. He's leveled out. It's good. But like, I think the core of Fight Club is good for men to test their strength, to push themselves that way. I think Project Mayhem, it's right in the name. Like, this is a bad idea.
Yeah, this is me.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, like blowing up all the credit bureaus, I don't know what the filing system was in the 90s, but I'm sure they have like a database of like your debt. It's not just like pieces of paper that are just gone forever. But maybe, I don't know, 1999?
Yeah, 1999, I mean, like, that was pre-cloud, I think, so maybe just all servers.
Yeah, all local servers, I guess.
Yeah. Wiped out the local debt anyway. Half-baked strategy, for sure.
Is there any more on this thought?
I see that you've Googled Fight Club.
Well, I'm doing some R&D as we're talking. I'll bring this up in a little bit, but
I'm watching it off to the side right now.
But we've seen this in almost every film, Nelson, we've watched. I don't know if there's one that this theme hasn't come up. There's a big gaping hole of why in this film.
Okay.
That this character is dealing with depression that's leading to insomnia.
Yeah.
That then, to our knowledge, leads to split personality.
Yeah.
Because like up until
and
we meet Brad Pitt's character,
that's one of the big like failings as far as like the psychology in this movie is that it's basically unheard of that insomnia leads to a split personality.
Right. And I'm not making that conclusion, but just this movie starts with just this innocent desire for healing.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to sleep, he wants rest, he wants peace.
Yeah.
And those things create healing. He's hurting from something.
Right.
He's suffering from something. Stuff that we don't really tap
And he wants
into.
medication to address it rather than figure out why you're staying up all night.
Doctor goes, go visit people who are really suffering.
Yeah, which is not like...
That's not a real...
The doctor's not a psychologist, but yeah.
Doctor would be like, you want drugs? Here, pay me.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So what do you think was driving his insomnia and his narcolepsy? I think, from what we see, it was a lack of fulfillment.
Yes. If I had to make a guess, that would be... Because, like, we don't really get any relationship status from him. We don't hear much, if any, about his familiar status, his family, his upbringing. We don't hear any of that.
Yeah.
What we do see is where he works.
Yeah.
And whenever they showed him in his workplace, I very much got Office Space vibes.
Oh, yeah. Dude, they even have the same filter of, like, gray.
Yeah, you're looking up to the boss. He's never happy about what he does.
Yeah.
The one scene where we see him do what he does, he's not really enjoying what he's into it. But like at the end of the day, he's like, yeah, that's what I do, and
he's also the least committed of the three guys
and
there.
he understands that what he does is dirty.
Yeah.
Because he's essentially seeing if we can cover up or if we have to release wrecks that our cars are involved in. So like, he definitely has a moral compass, at least at the beginning, or at least acknowledges morals.
Yeah.
At the beginning, we see him cry. We see him hug a guy, and he was like, I wept. There was this moment where I'm like, I wanted to get more on the emotional side of it. Then it just goes straight physical.
Yeah.
And which, obviously, that's the point of the movie. But like,
he goes from emotional exhaustion to sleep to physical exhaustion to sleep.
Yeah. And I think this identity theme that we get in almost every movie, I think for this one, it's just, there's this pulsating vibe of just like unrest. And he never found rest. I'm not for suicide, but like, the end of this movie, like, was he trying to take his own life, or did he know if he hit like just like he would still live? But like even in his trying to have silent rest or like eternal rest, he failed. You know,
what a loser!
I was very confused by that scene, by the way.
every attempt he made to get quiet, to get chill, relax, he failed.
Yeah,
or ended up exploding, literally.
Yeah.
In multiple ways. So sorry. That was just a big thing that I took from this movie. Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, so I just wanted to expand on that fulfillment aspect a little bit more because that's something I think we can all relate to as well. Because you hear him say multiple times when he's like talking about his apartment, like especially when he's explaining it to Tyler after it explodes, where he's like, "I almost had this furniture set complete. I almost had a nice wardrobe." Like he was working towards this point in his mind where he thought like, once I have this, then I'll be fulfilled, which I think every single person can relate to.
Yep.
And as a Christian, it's just something I know, like you're never going to find fulfillment in those things. There's not like a material thing you can have where like, now I'm good and I have everything I ever wanted. So that's just something I always see in movies.
Or career
right.
benchmark either.
Yeah. And that's a big reason why a lot of, for one, Hollywood's not Christian, but that's a big reason you don't see that sort of thing in movies, is because what a boring story if like every time someone encounters something difficult, they turn to the same thing and every movie is the same. Like you turn to a relationship with Christ, things like that. But he's seeking this thing and he thinks once he have it, he'll be fulfilled, but he's not. And I think that that's where his insomnia is kind of starting, where he's just going through these motions daily and he's getting like absolutely nothing fulfilling out of it. He's not getting what he thinks he'll get. And then when he starts going to those therapy groups, I think kind of talking what you're saying with like the suicide aspect, I think there's so part of it was an emotional release when he could cry, but I also think there was something attractive to him about like the thought of people thinking he's going to die and caring, which is, again, I'm not like a suicide expert, but that's usually a theme around that of like thinking nobody cares, but wanting someone to care and like that. So that's, I didn't know if that was a message they were trying to convey, where like this character wants to die, is like not satisfied with their life. And that's why they get like almost this high out of making people think they're terminally ill and then having them care about him, because nobody cares about him and he's not getting fulfillment anywhere.
Yeah.
And also, one more point. I do think like because he never has a name and like he's just narrator and he keeps using this different name, I also think there's like a little bit of messaging there of like, this is all of you. Like this, anyone can identify with this character because he doesn't have a name. You can transpose yourself onto this character. You probably don't get everything you want out of your job. You probably want X, Y, or Z, and then you think you'll be fulfilled. And you probably just want to have a moment where you can just let out all of your emotions in a wild way that most people will be like, what the heck are you doing?
Yeah.
Why we need to blow up all the credit card bureaus or whatever? Because then none of us have any debt if you blow up the 4 that are in New York City or wherever he lives.
Oh man, that as an economy wonk, that like really angered me. I was like, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Do you really think it's like random alter ego and know everything about economics like you do, man?
Yeah, I probably know more than it's healthy. One of the lines in this, when he's explaining what he does for a living, he says, taking the number of vehicles in the field, A, multiplied by the probable rate of failure, B, then multiply the result by the average out-of-court settlement, C, A times B times C equals X. If X is less than the cost of a recall, we don't do one. That, first of all, is not accurate to like the way that whole system works, because there's a lot of additional variables as well. But another thing in here that's not discussed, and we've discussed it in other episodes a bit, is this idea of regulatory capture. So, if all of the vehicle manufacturers in America can convince the safety board that like oversees them, which is a federal organization, that such and such is good enough, and the federal board says, yep, that's good enough, well then all of those manufacturers only have to comply to that. And anything exceeding that becomes a marketing gimmick, and anything below that is unacceptable. But as long as you're meeting that many deaths per year, you're in the clear.
Well,
and so that's a big aspect of that like this movie doesn't address. This movie is very anti-corporate, which I respect, but doesn't address the level to which like regulatory burden is a huge variable in that math. That like a lot of the times manufacturers can just like wash their hands of a thing that happened because, hey, we did everything that you know the Department of Transportation says that we have to do.
It's certainly a simplified equation that they offer, because even as he was saying it, I was like, well, B has so much in it, but like I think the illustration that it paints still stands, where a lot of times corporations look at things that way, and even if they do something that seems like just very enlightened or consumer friendly, a lot of times they're doing it for the image aspect, just like how they all have quirky Twitters where they post like really funny things, but it's like they just want your engagement. They don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I will say, like, I don't think that's a bad thing, right? Like, Mr. Beast recently built a bunch of wells in Africa. And why did he do that? Because he knew that would be good content for his YouTube channel. It's not because, like, he's ultimately altruistic.
But he still did it.
Yeah. And but the net result is wells in the Congo.
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
first of all, I just want to say his YouTube thumbnails creep me out. Like, whatever editing he does to his face is, like, the most unsettling thing I've ever seen. And maybe that's, like, part of the... Well, he does it because it makes me stop and go, what is with this ghoulish-looking man with, like, these deep shadows on his face?
Exactly. It makes you pause and look. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of Mr. Beast, but
I've never watched.
it's undeniable that he's successful at what he does. Going back to vehicle safety, right? And as you commented, when they do altruistic stuff, it's not because they're altruistic, it's because it's good for their bottom line. And that's okay. Like, in my opinion, that's okay. Because the net effect is a good thing happens, right? Even if it is good for their bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so...
It's all the win-win, you know?
Yeah, exactly. They've found a way to make good things profitable. I think that's great. But yeah, when he's going over that really irked me because, like, that's way oversimplified and also misses a ton of things. But it is true. Like, if a safety feature is going to cost them more to install than it will to pay out when it fails, they're going to take that course most of the time.
Yeah, but another thing that's not in there is, like,
the risk of exposure,
the value of a lost customer and, like, bad PR.
Yeah.
Because that also ultimately trickles down.
Exactly. If they get exposed for having knowingly installed this unsafe feature, that could be the end of their business. Wouldn't be the first time that a business was destroyed over that.
Yeah, but they do care because he went to his boss and exploited him with that information so that he could pay him indefinitely to not even work there. So.
Blackmail.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to ask this earlier, and this is a complete left turn, but when you guys watched this movie for the first time,
I don't remember the first time I watched it.
Okay, Zach, do you remember the first time you watched this movie?
Yeah, kind of like, as I said earlier, I don't know if I saw it all in one sitting, but I just know for a fact that I watched it on TBS specifically. It was like a movie on TV. You know, they used to do the DVD. No, that was FX, but FX used to do DVD on TV, something like that.
This is just really random. I was just curious, like, do you remember watching this and picking up on the twist early, or was it until the reveal that you, like, I'm always curious, like, when movies have big twists.
Yeah.
Like, were you one of the ones who were like, oh, I saw this coming. I had an idea. Or was it...
I certainly didn't.
Okay.
I was probably like 13 when I saw it, and I definitely wouldn't have been smart enough to pick up on that.
I can't remember the one
I was like, whoa.
but I feel like it was one... I have a hard time picking up on twists.
Yeah.
So I just... But
it's also an unbelievable twist.
Yeah.
But once you know the twist, when you watch back through it, there's so many things that, like, tee it up.
Like when he says, don't talk to that girl about me, like don't mention my name to her, things like that.
Or like even before you meet Tyler Durden in the movie, there are spliced in moments of Brad Pitt, which is both foreshadowing to him showing up in the movie and foreshadowing to the fact that Tyler Durden splices in pornography into family movies.
Yeah, which happens at the very end of the movie too.
Exactly. But there's one particular conversation that for me was like, if you know what the twist is, this is a really crazy conversation that's incredible.
Which conversation?
It's the narrator and Marla. Narrator says, listen, what are you getting out of all this? What? I mean, all this. Why do you keep... Is this making you happy? Yeah, well, sometimes. I don't know. I don't understand. Why does a weaker person need to latch onto a strong person? What is that? That's what he says to Marla. And Marla says, well, what do you get out of it? And what she means is, you're the stronger person. What are you getting out of latching on to me? But what he understands is, well, you're also latched onto Tyler Durden. What are you getting out of it? He says, no, that's not the same thing at all. It's totally different with us. And she says, us? What do you mean by us? And then Tyler Durden starts making a racket in the basement, and it derails the conversation.
Yep.
But, like, if you know that's coming, like, that conversation has entirely different context, meaning, and I think that is... As much as, like, one of our people that wrote in said, like, it kind of is really self-absorbed and self-impressed with its writing, I do think it is very successful in hiding the twist. Yeah. And then
through a first watch.
And then through the second watch, having that twist really
be rewarding.
Exactly.
Another good conversation was when, what's her name again? Marla? When the narrator interacts with Marla and she shows up. And he's got all those people outside and he's like drunk and stuff. And she's like, who are all these people? And then he's like, Tyler's not here. He's gone. Like, get out of here.
Right.
And you can tell she wants to say something, but doesn't.
Yeah.
Because, you know, she's like, you're Tyler. I see you right here.
Yeah.
So, you know, from her perspective, that means like you're saying we're done.
Yeah.
And then from his perspective, he's saying Tyler's not here.
Right.
So that's another one of those like little scenes. And the fact that she doesn't respond keeps the twist intact, but still has meaning when you watch it, knowing the twist.
That's right.
Which I thought was well pulled off as well.
And her performance is believable in both contexts.
Oh, absolutely. She's wonderful.
Exactly.
The scene where the narrator's talking about how like it's when Brad Pitt and Marla are not in the room at the same time at the house, and the narrator goes like, "This reminds me of when my parents were never in the same room at the same time."
Yeah, and they had the same upbringing, and he doesn't connect it.
For this rewatch for me, that was the scene where I went, "Okay, I remember the twist now."
Yeah,
that was the one where I'm like, "She's not in the same room with both of them."
Yeah.
Like, and with the dialogue that was going on at that time, I'm like, yeah, okay, it's all coming back to me now.
Twists like don't count if you can't find evidence of it on the second watch, and the same thing with like murder mysteries.
Yeah.
My biggest problem with murder mysteries is when they reveal who the killer is, it's at the same time they reveal new information that you didn't have to try and guess the killer yourself, which is kind of what I think of.
Kenneth Branagh's Poirot series has done really good there.
What is it?
Kenneth Branagh.
Books or movies?
He's a director, an actor. So he plays Poirot and directs himself playing Poirot.
Oh, the murder, Haunting in Venice.
Yeah.
Those are Agatha Christie books.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I've seen one of those.
If I recall, though, one of those it did exactly what I'm talking about. I don't.
Okay.
It was a while since I saw it where, like, the same, like, oh, I could have never known that was a killer because I didn't know the thing you just revealed. Like, I like it when they give you all the information and it's like, because part of the fun of watching murder mystery is guessing, and you're like, well, how could I have guessed that? You just told me this.
Yeah, I've only
right as you
seen
revealed the killer.
the Nile one.
Okay.
Murder. I've not seen the first one.
I haven't seen the Nile.
So Murder on the Orient Express, I'd already read, so I knew what it was. Death on the Nile, and the newest one is Haunting in Venice.
Haunting in Venice.
With both of those, I will say, if you go back and rewatch it and you know who the killer is, everything that Poirot points out, the information's there. The dots are incredibly difficult to connect.
Mm-hmm.
I may be getting it confused with whatever the Ryan Johnson ones are.
Oh,
These
Knives
murder
Out.
mysteries.
Yeah. Knives Out and Glass
He might have done that with the newer one where I was like,
Now, Glass Onion, they laid, like, there was enough clues for, like, you didn't have all the pieces, but I feel like Glass Onion is one that you can rewatch and go, yeah, this all makes sense now.
There's a board game called Sherlock Holmes, Consulting Detective. And with that one, at the end of it, when you feel you've solved the crime, you answer some questions, and if you get them right, you get points. And then you also get points deducted for how many places you had to visit to get that information.
Oh.
And it's impossible that you'll ever beat Sherlock Holmes. It's not going to happen.
That's fantastic.
Like, literally impossible?
I like that.
Yeah, I don't think it could ever happen. Because, like, you'll read through Sherlock Holmes' answer, and the thing is, like, there's no way. There's no way that you piece that together with that little information. No.
I love that.
But it's a fun date night. You go over these old newspapers, and you're, like, looking at this map.
And that one you're saying is specifically Sherlock Holmes?
Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, linked below.
Lindsay and I have done ones from, like, Target or, like, TJ Maxx, where there's not a brand that comes with them, but it's these boxed investigations.
Okay.
And it comes with pictures of potential suspects. And you've got a map, you've got an itinerary of somebody. Like, so we've done some of these murder mystery table games, but like it wasn't the Sherlock Holmes thing once. Yeah. And we figured ours out. We've done it once, and it took us about 3.5 hours. But like because we didn't want to commit on anything. Yeah. We were so set, like, we don't want to end this and it be wrong because we can never play this again. Like, it's a one and done type of game.
Yeah, you can never get this exact scenario.
Right.
Right.
So we waited so long to actually go, okay, let's look at the answer.
Right.
Because we just like, let's comb through it one more time. We want to get this right.
Yeah.
We just kept playing.
Yeah.
Kept going over it over and over again. We had sticky notes over the wall. Like I think we went through like a 6-pack of like drink, like, which isn't much, but like we drank everything we had in the fridge. We just going over like, let's go get Taco Bell. Let's just keep doing this.
Yeah.
We gotta figure this out.
You know the Charlie Kelly Pepe Sylvia meme?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm picturing.
It's what it was. Like, I love it.
There is no Pepe Sylvia.
We got boxes full of Pepe.
If you want to try the detective board game, the Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective is a good series. I think a better one than that is Chronicles of Crime, which like has like cards and QR codes, and you use your phone with it, and it's got like some VR aspects as well. Much better detective game. Both of those linked below. Check those out through our Amazon affiliate. We get a kickback and appreciate your shopping. It's a nice little commercial that we wedged in there.
Man, we just finished our 45-minute rehearsed lead up to that. advertisement.
So we're going to get to the episode now.
I've got here a line that I think is a really good, especially with the conversations about toxic masculinity and like modern conceptions of what that is. This next line is really interesting. You're going to see headlines talking about how if you're into lifting weights for self-improvement, it might mean that you're right wing, and that's the aspect of toxic.
I lift weights for self-improvement.
And you are right wing. You're a right wing extremist.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly what I said in the beginning.
And one of the lines in this is from Tyler Durden. Self-improvement is but self-destruction. And he pauses, and he never finishes the thought. And it's really interesting that, like, in this movie, self-destruction is the toxicity of masculinity. Self-improvement is something that they should have been pursuing. In our modern context and social commentary on toxic masculinity, you'll see a lot of commentary saying that self-improvement is toxicity. That, you know, if you're going to the gym to lose weight and put on muscle, that's because you're fat phobic. That's because you're whatever.
So anytime you're working on something to improve, there's the argument that you're toxic.
Yeah. And even if you go to a psychologist or counselor, a lot of the self-improvement and emotional health conversation there has moved to looking for the fault in the people that raised you and the people that are around you and making them aware of their toxic traits rather than addressing how you respond to that.
Yeah. I think a more like prevalent concept I see, at least like in my own life, is that there's definitely a big move for like do whatever makes you happy. Like, so I would be shocked if like someone shames someone like for working out. I think where like the line maybe gets crossed of like thinking that you're fat phobic or like fat shaming is more like if you're like really in your face about it, or if you're like constantly posting pictures of it and saying like, you know, this is the way, like this is how you got to do it, sort of thing. But like, because
proselytize
a lot of times like lifting weights, yeah. Well, it's funny because I think in this movie, Tyler Durden even says like lifting weights is stupid or something like that.
Yeah.
There's like some throwaway line, which I think is ironic because Brad Pitt clearly like worked out like for this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other aspect is lifting weights or exercise accomplishes almost the same thing as like fighting or like whatever does, where you're like getting energy out, you're like amping up your testosterone, you're like blowing off steam, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So to me, those are kind of like similar activities in a way. It's just a lot healthier way and a lot less jarring way to bystanders than beating yourself up in a parking lot like the narrator does.
Yeah, but I mean, pursue your truth, right? If beating yourself up in a parking lot is your truth, go for it.
Yeah, do it, man. As long as he's not beating up somebody else, beat yourself up.
On the topic of, you know, don't hurt people, don't take their stuff, and as long as you're not doing it to anybody else, there's a big tonal shift in this movie when Project Mayhem starts giving homework.
Oh, yeah.
And the first piece of homework...
Because he's in charge, man, like I said.
You got a point there.
He's dishing out homework.
Actually, I guess it's pre-Project Mayhem. That's Fight Club still. The homework he gives is you're going to start a fight with a total stranger, you're going to start a fight, and you're going to lose. And when I heard that, what I imagined was people like donkey punching people in the back of the head just in public. What it ended up being instead was like provoking people to fights. And I think that is a little different, because if you provoke someone to a fight, there's a degree to which they've consented. They've initiated the violence. You initiated the aggression, but they initiated violence. Your thoughts?
Well, the guy who started trying to pick the fight with a priest, I think he like shoved him. Like, I think that guy was crossing that line.
No,
there was a few where they were just, well, yeah, but I think maybe he like started
shoving people. Yeah.
There was one guy that like threw someone onto like a car or something.
Yeah.
But I think that scene, that's one of the iconic scenes to me, because it's a fun scene to envision like how you would react if that happened. And I think there's a lot of truth in saying like most people don't want to fight because like it's, you know, it's something like, I don't know, I'm sure you've had like your wife or something ask like, oh, if so and so did this, like, would you fight him? You know? And you're like, I mean, I might go to like jail, like it's gotta, you know, you're trying to like figure out like where that line is for you.
Yeah. That's kind of like the question of, would you still love me if I was a worm?
yeah. She's chock full of those. Those are great. You're like, yes, of course.
Sure, why not?
Yeah, it's like we all have that like hypothetical line in our head, and then there's also the difference of like reality. Because like again, Tyler Durden is like what guys maybe think they want to be.
Right.
Like, yeah, I'll react to anything like in this primal way. But then when push comes to shove, literally,
Right.
you might be like, "Hey, man, what's your problem? Like, chill out."
Right. And that's actually very rational, right? Like that is the appropriate way to respond.
Yeah, yeah. Because if there's nothing to gain, I mean, if you're just eager to fight everyone, you probably got something else going on, or like you train fighting and you just are eager to check it out or something.
Yeah.
But in most cases, nothing constructive is going to come.
No.
If there's a difference between defending yourself or like somebody else, and then just being like, "Oh, you want to fight? Okay."
Yeah. Yeah. So there's this concept in economics of moral hazard.
Moral hazard?
Yeah.
Did you say?
Moral hazard.
Oh.
And it's usually talked about in the context of like the Federal Reserve. If a bank knows they're going to bail them out, then they'll continue to do bad lending practices because they know that even if they screw up, the Federal Reserve is going to come bail them out. So there's really no risk. It also exists in foreign policy where like the United States allies will often be very provocative with its neighbors, knowing that if a conflict is initiated, the U.S. is going to step in. It's kind of like when, you know, a little kid picking fights in the neighborhood because he knows his brother, who's bigger and stronger, is going to step in and get involved as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember where I was going with this. I had a point I was leading up to. What was the last thing you said, Zach?
Hey, good enough, man. You said a lot of smart stuff. The last thing I said is like we all have like a hypothetical line where we would, you know, fight someone or not. I was talking about my wife saying if someone did this, would you fight him? We were talking about how it's more often than not logical not to fight back unless you're in severe risk of like dying or something.
And one of the points Tyler Durden makes there is like most people are not going to get in a fight, right? And that's because most people know, even like at a deep subconscious level, violence is very expensive and should be avoided.
Mm-hmm.
One of the pushbacks I hear a lot when I talk about like anarcho-capitalism is like, oh, it's just going to devolve into chaos and warlordism and stuff. And it's like, well, actually, the vast majority of people are conflict avoidant. They don't want to engage in violence because violence is expensive. Violence, it carries with it a lot of risk. And so most...
Can I interject?
Yeah, please.
If that's true, though, that's also the same risk of like, if most people are avoiding conflict, then that gives way for the warlord to come in because he knows no one's going to resist him. Unless that's the point you're already going to make. But.
Yeah. So like that is kind of like the worst case scenario of anarcho-capitalism is that you end up with a state, which is what we already have.
Constant.
The worst case of anarcho-capitalism is that you end up with warlords, which is what we have. But like you look at like the Wild West, for example, which is not nearly as wild as we remember it to be. Everybody was carrying guns.
I played Red Dead.
Everybody was willing to be violent and ready to be violent if necessary. And the result was that by and large, society was very, very civil because being uncivil often led to duels and nobody wanted that.
Yeah, true.
And so most people like avoided being offensive because they didn't want some guy who was a hothead to be like, oh, you think I'm an idiot? All right, pistols at dawn. Right?
Crap. I actually got a dentist appointment.
I have a very early dentist appointment tomorrow.
Yeah, you know the early ones in the Wild West that they have?
At dawn. Dentist at dawn. So yeah, I see your point, right? There will be people that will take advantage of the fact that a lot of people are going to be conflict avoidant, but also in a society where people kind of expect that they're going to have to some degree, resolve disputes on their own. I don't know. I think it levels out pretty quick. So.
I mean, it's the same like argument like gun control type thing where it's like if someone can concealed carry, then like someone's less likely to, you know, think they can do X, Y, or Z, or like our right to bear arms, like the government won't like do anything to jeopardize our safety if they know that we can just like have guns of our own. It's like kind of the same thing that you're talking about, it seems like.
Yeah. So for example, recently in New York City, there was a woman that was mugged, and while she was being mugged, some other guy pulled out a gun that he had concealed carried illegally in New York and fired it into the air a couple times to warn the mugger, hey, get out of here. The mugger stopped the mugging and fled. And when she was interviewed about it later, the victim said, well, you know, the fact that people in New York City have guns really makes me scared. I was just like...
Bad guys with guns. Yeah.
So, for me, it's like that kind of harkens back to moral hazard. If the criminal expects that there aren't people with guns, criminals are much more likely to be willing to engage in violence because they know that they're not going to be met with violence.
Not as expensive, as you say.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Violence
I'm learning
is
economics.
expensive. Yeah.
Slowly trying to convert me to be like a libertarian anarchist. Is that what this is about?
I'm not trying to convert people. I just think that my ideas are the most convincing.
Yeah, okay. That's great, man.
Because I was convinced of them. I wasn't born this way.
You had your own Tyler Durden.
That's right.
Got to loop it back to the movie somehow.
Delinquent psychopaths. All right, let's move on to new topics. What else we got here? That's all you've got, Jeff?
You've mentioned other ones that I have. But
Yeah.
Yeah. So
What about you, Zach? Anything else you want to touch on here? One reason that I had you on specifically, Zach, and one thing I was excited to talk about Fight Club with, is that you and I share a hobby that also touches on that male desire for adventure and meaning and to prove yourself. And surprisingly, very different from combat sports, is Dungeons and Dragons. And you have what I consider to be one of the best actual play podcasts for tabletop role-playing games, Mortals and Portals.
Oh, thanks, man.
What are some of the kind of like overlap here between
absolutely.
Fight Club and that? And it's tackling the same issue from very different aspects, obviously, but what do you see here?
Cool. Yeah, no. I got at least like 3 separate themes I could touch on. And for those of you that don't know, so tabletop RPGs, D&D, Pathfinder, it's basically like a game where you have someone called like a GM or a DM that sets up this scenario, explains it to you, and then you get to interact with that scenario. And you get to say like what you want your character to do. The game master will determine what check you need to roll on a dice to see if you succeed. Like they set a threshold you need to meet. You roll and see if you do it. And if so, you get to progress. So
it's make-believe with more steps.
Yeah, it's make-believe. Yeah. But as Nelson mentioned, I GM an adventure for a podcast called Mortals and Portals. And so basically what I do is I make up the story and, guide players who are essentially characters, just like in a movie, through these scenarios. And we try and put them in situations that, develop their character further, expose traits about their character, things like that. So one of the first ones I wanted to touch on is just the overall twist in this movie, because as a game master, when you're coming up with a story, a lot of times you're trying to surprise players with this scenario that they didn't expect, because they know you're trying to guide them towards an adventure. So they're always diligent about the situations you're putting in front of them, but you want to try and get them in these scenarios in an unexpected way. Right. But the trick is, so they don't think you're pulling a fast one on them or you just made something up. You got to leave little clues to let them know that they are just about to run into that thing. They're not surprised and they know you're actually crafting a story.
Right.
So that's why I have huge respect for Fight Club and how they pulled off the twist but left clues. Because, for example, in an old campaign we did, that's what they're called, campaigns, these adventures, I had this character. He got summoned down this alley by this powerful wizard, and none of the other players got to hear what their interaction was. And during this interaction, the wizard tricked the player into turning him into a frog, and he put him in a bag, and then this wizard turned into that character. So he did this magical spell to look like him. And I told the player look, you're going to now have to role play this powerful wizard being you, and you're going to tag along with this party for 3 sessions or something. So he had to play out the rest of the adventure acting like someone pretending to be him, and he left little clues. We talked about ways to leave clues, and then at the end he did this big reveal and killed a king right in front of him, and then revealed that he was somebody else, and they were mind blown. But then we talked for 30 minutes after about all the reasons that they could have seen this coming, and it was so satisfying and so fun. So
yeah,
that's something I really respect about this movie. I'm sure you've been in plenty of twists there, Nelson, playing games.
Yeah, not nearly well crafted as yours, but yes.
Thank you.
When you talked about that first one with the Tyler Durden twist, what I thought you were going to talk about is how players have a tendency to make exaggerated versions of themselves or idealistic versions of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes Dungeons and Dragons also almost ends up being therapy, because they're now unpacking issues that they have through a character in a make-believe world.
That's essentially what Tyler Durden is. He's a manifestation of what the narrator wants to be. So in these tabletop RPGs, you're let me insert myself into high stakes scenarios I'll never be in my real life, and let me craft a version of myself that I would like to be in these types of scenarios. So if you're not the bravest person or you shy away from conflict, but the ideal version of yourself is you're jumping in there, you're defending people, you're standing up for what's right all the time, and you make a heroic character that does that, and you get to like live out those things, which is essentially what the narrator is doing in this movie, is like trying to realize their fantasies. And so that's like a great point, Nelson. That's exactly what tabletop RPGs are, is being whatever version of yourself you want to be, or even just not even like the one you want to be, but maybe one that like for instance, if you're a really polite person and you want to stay polite, you like being polite, but just once you'd like to know what it feels like to just be a jerk, you just make a character that's a jerk, and it's funny, and you get to like blow off steam, and that way you get to experience that.
Absolutely. And then there's no hurt feelings.
Everyone's
no
hey bro, I'm role playing.
I'm
role playing.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
It's what my character would do.
That's a classic trope of it's what my character would do, man. You're like, well, why'd you have to steal all my gold, man? It's like, and then the last big one
you robbed
is
me and left me for dead.
You stabbed me in my sleep. That's what my character would do. And then the last big one is just like you get to go on adventures in tabletop RPGs. You get to like go do crazy heroic things. You get to like step out of the norm, which again is something the narrator is doing. He's just in this like job he hates, doing this thing he hates, going to his like mundane apartment, going through the motions, not getting fulfillment out of it. He just wants something to like break that mold. And that's another like escapism that playing these games like offers you, is like, like I said, I'm a software developer and I stare at a screen and type code and, review code and all this stuff. But when I play tabletop RPGs, I got to go fight dragons and, be a knight and have magical spells. And it's just like
sell apples.
Yeah, and sell apples. Yeah, if you want to know what that means, check out Mortals and Portals. Just episode 1. Well, we'll reveal that.
You'll be clued in.
So that's really like, it's shocking the amount of crossover. And then also kind of like you're touching on, tabletop RPGs have combat and you get to fight things and, kill like powerful things. And there's kind of that like innate feeling in all of us to just kind of like, we all watch like violent movies. Like we're not violent, but there's this like, what's the word I'm looking for? Vicarious. Yeah, almost like this vicarious nature to like experience something so jarring, so different from your everyday life, and to just kind of get that like angst or testosterone or like whatever primitive like nature you have in you, where you're like, I want to, kill some goblins, some obviously bad goblins. I want to, wield a sword and deal with that. So, it's crazy how much crossover there is between Fight Club and tabletop RPGs. And by the way, Jeff, I think Nelson told me you don't want to play these games, man. And it's like, dude, if you like hanging out with friends, you like stories, you like characters, you like narrative, you like improv, you would love tabletop RPGs, man.
You would think I would love these. And here's what I found, and I'm not saying I would never try it again. Right now, my schedule,
the right group is everything with D&D.
And right now, my schedule is the biggest conflict for me being willing to invest in this.
Right.
Oh, for sure.
But I'm not a man of patience.
You have to wait your turn. I will say, Zach, I've pitched Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, all that to Jeff a bunch of times. While you've been talking, I've been watching his monitor. He went to Mortals and Portals website. Then I saw him on Paizo's website looking at all kinds of Pathfinder stuff. And right now he's scrolling through a list of the best RPGs. They are computer RPGs, not tabletop.
Well, hold on. If you just put some stuff in your Amazon cart, we can do your Amazon commercial again, and then you can get all your tabletop RPG stuff you need.
Yeah, Pathfinder Core Rulebook Remastered on Amazon. Link below.
I love the idea of it. I love fiction. I love fantasy, like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. Like I'm into all that stuff. And I'm into the choose your own adventure type stuff.
Yeah.
For me, the minimal experience I've had was sitting down to a tabletop RPG.
Right.
And especially being with.
I think I've played once. And that wasn't a criticism.
I'll be the first to say not all tables are made equal. You can definitely have a bad experience playing.
I realized very quickly that the people I was playing with are super into it, and I just want like a casual
you got to be easy to it, man.
An hour or so, it was intense, and it was also slow moving.
Yeah,
and I'm
it can be that way.
I'm bored, and also intimidated.
It's in my opinion one of the most special things in the world.
I like
is playing make believe with a bunch of grown up men.
Yeah, I'm not saying I would never do it again, but it's not high on my priority list.
Jeff, if I may,
absolutely.
the very first time I played was with, and Jeff or Nelson will know how ridiculous this is. It was with 10 people at once.
Oh, that's way too many.
Bunch of us had never played. No. but it was so much fun because none of us knew the rules, and knowing now how to like DM, the DM let us do whatever we want, didn't care, and we all just laughed and had so much fun, and I was hooked immediately. So I went from this like game with like no rules, just do whatever. We're all just laughing, making a mockery of everything. It was super fun. And then I just slowly started playing and like GMing with my friends, and I wasn't doing voices, and we were all kind of like a little embarrassed and just kind of easing into it. And now I GM a podcast and put way too much effort into it and do all kinds of stupid voices. So yeah, it really is like if you're playing with a group that's super hardcore and you're not ready to do that yet, that's like
you got
because for years I played just saying like the character says this to you, and I would just like explain it to them. That's a totally fine way to play too, man. It's just chill, and it's all about making decisions and exploring your character and going on adventures. Really, is what it's all about.
And that was the other thing too. Like I think I spent 20 minutes because like it was at your apartment. It was back in the days at your apartment.
Oh, I was the GM for this.
Man. Yeah.
Oh man, it's my fault.
I'm not going to name names, but there was some people that actually wanted to be on our show.
It's me. It's my fault, man. No, I remember this. We weren't playing Pathfinder. We were playing Savage Worlds.
All the people that were with me though, we were in that room. I enjoyed spending time with. But it was the moment where like, okay, you got to build your character. Okay, and then we spent 20 to 30 minutes on building my character.
Oh, you built it at the session?
And then at the session.
Yeah, it was a zero session.
And then
Nelson, you got to give him a champion, pre-made champion fighter from.
Yeah, that's my bad. I think that was the second time I'd ever GM.
Oh, dude.
I thought it was DM.
Mea culpa.
Hey, hold on. That's the other thing.
What do you?
It depends on the game system.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Always be nice to your GMs, man. Be nice to Nelson. You put in a lot of work.
Yeah.
I had a great time. But
all my favorite players bring me beer. I'm now at the point where, like, even in the games that I play where I'm not the GM, I'm just a player, I can't not be an over-the-top, like, voice and character. In the campaign I'm in right now, I'm a goblin anarchist named Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Do you play weekly now?
I play weekly, yeah. I try to play weekly.
Oh,
I miss more.
I didn't realize you were
but...
still playing. Like,
yeah. I love it. It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, I mean, most of our campaign worlds are just a mashup of all of our favorite movies. So it's like you listed like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and stuff. Like that's true.
Yeah.
You can also like take a movie like Fight Club. You know, you could make a Fight Club campaign if you wanted, where you're like in this gritty, realistic world. Like any type of setting you want, you can conform the game to. And that's the best part about it. It's not all just like the Lord of the Rings trope if you're not into that sort of thing. So
yeah,
another option.
Play and make believe with your best friends.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, yeah, I've got nothing to add. Nelson, you're good before we get to wrap up?
I mean, I could probably talk about this movie for another hour, but we should get into wrap up.
Yeah, Zach, any final thoughts on the movie before we get into wrap up?
My only final thought is in the end when he shoots himself to kill Tyler. I was just so confused because he put the gun in his mouth and shot it, and it killed Tyler, but he survived, and it looked like it just went out his cheek or something. So I don't know how that killed Tyler, and two, it seemed like he was healing as he was speaking to everyone, like he was like getting better over time.
Recovering,
yeah. I didn't understand that.
It's interesting from what I picked up too, like, and maybe Tyler's scar on his face was from something different, but like when they after the gunshot and they showed Tyler before they revealed the back of the head. You see the scar on his face. I thought the scar on the face was starting to get worse and worse. Like his mouth was smoking and he just collapsed. So I thought it was showing Tyler was getting worse because his wound was becoming more and more apparent. But then when he fell over, they showed the wound on the back of his head.
Yeah.
But then when you go to Edward Norton's character, the narrator, you see it's the side of his face.
Right.
So even the way it affected the narrator's head is different than the way it affected the body. Like it's like the gunshot didn't even correlate from one body to the other, even if it was the same person, but it's not the same person.
Let me give the devil's advocate here. Which is
Brad Pitt still be living?
Because the back of Brad Pitt's head blown off because the guy who controls the personality thinks that that's what should happen, even though the bullet exited the side of his neck. People in shock also will recover quicker than they actually should. So him talking isn't entirely impossible because he's wildly in shock. And then we actually don't know that Tyler Durden is in fact dead because a figment of your imagination. Well, there's Fight Club 2 first of all, but a figment of your imagination can't die, right? So he could survive that. He survived all kinds of different attacks.
He could
easily come back. And while the narrator is in shock, he's too preoccupied to think of Tyler Durden. So I think that all of that can be explained without like special pleading.
Yeah.
And the only other thing I had to say, which is more just an observation than anything, is
Yeah.
like in that final scene when he's like fighting him and he's like beating him up and he's rolling down the stairs and they're showing over the video camera that he's actually just like fighting himself. It makes me think of like, because he's a figment of his imagination. I don't know if you guys have like ever had a dream where you're like fighting someone and like in your mind you're like, I hope they don't do this thing, and then they do
And then
it,
they do
and
it.
it's like,
Yeah.
like your own mind is beating you because you're thinking like, this is the one thing that I couldn't stop, and then they do it. It
My
just made me
kryptonite.
think of that, like while he's fighting him, he's like, oh man, I hope he doesn't push me down the stairs. Oh, he did, because he's in my imagination. So funny.
Yeah. So this is getting into real deep nerd territory. In the book series, The King Killer Chronicles, there's like this magic ability to split your mind, and so you can have two continuous thoughts at the same time. The narrator could conceivably use reverse psychology to trick Tyler Durden into a suboptimal fighting strategy.
Ooh, he could.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, even Tyler Durden said that to him. He was like, he was trying to defuse the bomb, and he was like,
Yeah.
if you know the combination, then I do. And he's like, or I spent
Right.
all day thinking about the wrong one to make you think it's the wrong one. You're like, oh crap, oh my god.
That's one of those like things that's only deep if you're high.
Which I'm sure whoever made the movie was.
Yeah, I'm sure Chuck Palahniuk was doing a fair bit of drugs leading up to this.
This movie definitely had the essence of like just like watching it while you're stoned type of vibe. It's
Yeah.
like,
You'd be like, wait, what?
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
how did you just do it?
I'm
how
a
do you
20-year-old
die?
stoner,
Oh.
and this is
Yeah.
deep.
I'm so confused right now, man.
Dude, anarchy,
That's
bro.
my impression of it.
I hate credit card bureaus.
Alrighty.
Yeah, peak anarchism is blowing up credit card bureaus.
Success. All right, wrap up questions, my friends. Would you guys recommend this film?
I would.
I absolutely would. Yeah, absolutely.
I think I would too, to the right person. It's
Yeah.
not, it's a movie that I can appreciate and I can understand why other people appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's not my cup of tea, but like, I get it.
I think it's also like culturally significant as like a very significant movie of the time it was in. So it's like gets
Yeah.
extra points for not just being a good movie, but just being one that like it feels like you need to see, even if you're not going to like it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely. I think that's on point.
Oh, which reminds me, if you recommend the movie to someone, you obviously can't spoil the twist. And I think I heard somewhere that like part of the meta of the rule, don't talk about Fight Club, is to like also like meta warn you like not to spoil the movie
Right.
to anyone you recommend it to. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but I thought that was kind of interesting. Take.
I think-
Outside of this podcast, I try not to spoil movies for other people
Right.
I'm talking about movies to and stuff. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it without spoiling it because it's a fun quiz.
I will say on the don't talk about Fight Club rules numbers 1 and 2, and Brad Pitt gets frustrated and says, "Clearly, you guys have been breaking that rule because there's a lot of fresh faces here." That reminds me of one of my favorite little cheeky jokes. Welcome to Plastic Surgery Addicts Anonymous. I see a lot of new faces, which is pretty disappointing.
That's really funny. Good joke, man.
This movie is rated R. Would you guys change the rating?
No, it's definitely
No.
R.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's like
it's
nudity,
it's
like full frontal, like male nudity in it. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
There's also female breasts as well.
Yeah,
Not male
and
breasts.
no, there are male breasts.
There
as
are
well.
male breasts too. That's true. Lots of pectorals. But yeah, it's
lots of pics.
gratuitous.
A dildo as well.
Yes.
Yeah, gratuitous.
Oh, yeah.
good word.
Gratuitous. Thank you. I recently learned the definition of that. All right. This movie is from 1999.
Yeah.
Has it aged well?
All but the CGI.
That's the note I had, Nelson.
The CGI is bad.
Yeah,
And I don't know if that's a budgetary thing or if it's just like it
No,
just
from
didn't age
99,
well.
it didn't.
Yeah.
honestly, I was kind of surprised by the quality of the CGI, knowing it was 99 and knowing that I just assumed, like you guys said the budget, but I assumed as a cult classic and how long the movie was, I didn't think it would have like an insane budget for the CGI. Because I thought they like kind of went above and beyond to even put that in the budget. Like when they show how his house or his apartment blew up and they like do that full
Yeah.
CGI rendering of how it does it. It's like, that doesn't feel like you needed to go that hard. So I'm surprised
Right.
they even included that in there.
That was the best of the CGI.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was also when you start in the inside the trash can and
That
you
was
pulling
bad.
out.
Yeah.
That was terrible. And the intro credits.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, I actually have a note of that too. Yeah.
all-
That felt
all-
like Spider-Man 1.
or like the X-Men movies when you're going
Yeah.
through Cerebro. Like
Yeah.
like all three CGI moments I think could have been done without. And this movie could have all been practical.
Yeah.
and been just as fine, if not just as fine.
It would
if not
age better if it were practical.
Correct.
If someone didn't tell you like what movie you were watching or what era it was made, and they just played the opening credits, you would need like maybe 10 seconds to be like, "This is late '90s, 2000s," because it even had like the rock techno style music and then just like abstract CGI.
Yeah,
the intro did not fit the movie.
I feel like that was my same criticism of Seven.
Yeah,
4 years earlier.
Yeah,
it's a Chuck Palahniuk issue.
I think that's just like because it doesn't fit, but it's more just like acquiescing or like just accommodating to the trends of the time of like, this is what intros look like for movies in this era, so we have to make one that looks like it.
Yeah. Brad Pitt in this movie is just absolute peak 90s.
Yeah.
And the fact that that's like Edward Norton's ideal man just kind of like even feeds into more to like, this is what the 90s was.
Yeah.
And it's just insane. It's just so weird.
All right. Would this be in your personal top 250?
I think it's like borderline cutoff for me.
At the bottom of your top 250?
Yeah. It might make it, might not. I don't know. But like low level.
Yeah.
I don't know where in my top 250 it'd be, but like if I'm going to list out 250 movies, I know for a fact Fight Club's going to be somewhere in there.
Now, you like this movie, Zach? Would you say this is in your would you say it's in your top 10? Like would you put this in your top favorite movies of all time?
No, I wouldn't say it's like a movie like I cherish. It's just a movie like I really appreciated for what it was and what it pulled off, and I like it like stylistically, but like again, like rewatchability, like so much of that is from the twist that makes it cool, and then like it is fun picking up on what you missed, but then once you kind of have experienced that, it's not necessarily like I said, it doesn't make you feel good or anything like that. It's just so I wouldn't really put it up there as like an all-time favorite, but I feel like it's a must-see and really good.
I agree. My top 250 rating is literally just based on the rewatchability.
Yeah.
I don't think I need to watch this one. I could see it like as I continue to add movies, I could see it continuing to stay up there and linger.
Yeah,
but it would definitely be at the bottom, if not removed from my top 250. Because like I could go the rest of my life without watching this movie again.
Yeah, now that I've seen it as an adult and a teenager, I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So yeah, I won't be seeking this movie out again anytime.
I would say if I knew somebody hadn't seen this and they're adult and they can handle mature themes, I'd recommend it, and I'd also say, and right after it, watch Everything Everywhere All at Once. Because Fight Club is really great at exploring nihilism, but Everything Everywhere All at Once takes that next step in philosophy into absurdism, and we talked about it with that episode. Yeah. And so I think like as an exploration of nihilism, I think this movie does really, really well. But I don't think it's self-aware enough to move past that. Like I don't think it is. I think it kind of accidentally shows the pitfalls of nihilism.
Oh, absolutely. Like, yeah, everything's destroyed in the end,
and for what?
People die. Doesn't really like in a better situation. He's just like holding hands with I didn't really know what the message was at the end because he's just like holding hands with Marla. And everything.
The last line is very funny, which is "You met me at a very strange time in my life."
Iconic line.
Last question here: why is this on the top 250? What do you think is important in this film that keeps it on the top 250?
I think it speaks really well to the angst that teenage to 20-something males experience and can't articulate. It's also that same angst is one of the reasons that like that's what is a fighting age male, right? That's what military targets. And this movie really does a good job of exploring, but not answering those questions. And I think a lot of men need that issue explored for them, and they're not getting it explored through conversation. So like being able to see it helps them process it a bit. That's my belief.
Yeah, I'd agree a lot with like what you said, and then I'd also just add like the twist. Definitely, like, because I think without the twist, this movie isn't like iconic, obviously. And then I think visually, like, there's just so much like visual storytelling with like how mundane the office is, how like depressed he looks in like those settings, like how he physically unravels as he's like becoming part of Fight Club and just like not caring, like you just see him all beat up, loose tie, like how gritty the house is that they stay in, that just shows like that they don't care about society. Like how cool Brad Pitt looks. I just think there's...
And they even managed to romanticize that gross house, too.
Yeah, absolutely. They're like, isn't this great to just not care about this and that? Like, so there's just such like powerful visual storytelling in there. And then I just think the concept's like iconic. It's got iconic lines like the first rule about Fight Club is, and you met me at a weird time in my life, and just like all those things that I think it just kind of stood the test of time in that way. So I think that's a big reason that it's up there. And also like the Brad Pitt, like how Jack is in this movie. Like so many people, like when they start to work out, they're like, I want to look like Brad Pitt in Fight Club. And I almost feel like that's another reason this movie is so iconic is because of just Brad Pitt in this movie.
It's funny because like Brad Pitt is Edward Norton's idealized self, and so many people look at it and like, that's what I want to look like. That's what I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I'd be happy to look like Edward Norton.
Also, he has spiky hair. So it's 1999 and he has spiky hair. I had spiky hair in 1999. So yeah, pretty cool. It definitely had nothing to do with him in that movie though. So I was like,
I feel in the 40-some movies we've done, I feel like this is the first of its kind when it comes to the grittiness of this movie. Now, 7 would be right there with it.
Same director too.
Same director and stuff. Like, I think there is something to say about just the overall emotion and I don't want to say fictitious, but just this
atmosphere.
The atmosphere that this movie implies. Like,
and I think
it's a
7
moody
does it
movie.
better.
Right. And I would agree with you. I've ranked 7 way higher than this.
Yeah.
It's a moody movie. And like for some people,
a mood V, if you will.
It's a mood V, yeah. For some people, like it's one that like they need. Like, and so I can see people needing this type of moody in their life and stuff. But yeah, so I think it's the atmosphere, it's the vibe of the movie. And the quintessential 90s, I think, taps into that vibe really well.
Yeah.
A lot of the music of the day of the 90s had a lot of that, like, it sounds poppy, but the lyrics are really dark.
Yeah.
Like, there's this juxtaposition in this. And before Nelson and I started recording...
9/11 hadn't even happened yet. They were already depressed.
Right. Before we started recording, I asked Nelson, I was like, Nelson, would this movie be considered a dark comedy? Because there was a lot of stuff in this movie that was like,
comedic elements,
and there was all these little poppy elements. And like, it reminded me a lot of 90s music, where audibly, oh yeah, this is light and air, but when you finally listen to the lyrics, you're like, oh, that's dark.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and so I think there's that juxtaposition of emotions that really has a depth to it, and I appreciate it. Again, I didn't like it, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think this movie does have some very funny moments.
Yeah,
but I would not say that this is a dark comedy.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that's fine. I'm not arguing that.
Yeah.
Point, it just I was a little confused on the vibe that was being.
Yeah.
So, but that's all I've got. That's all.
Zach, if people want to check out what you're working on, what's the best way to find you in Mortals and Portals and all that?
Yeah, I mean, just pretty much Google Mortals and Portals, and something should pop up. We're on.
It's linked below as well.
Our social medias are on Reddit, Instagram. We have a Patreon. But you can find our podcast, Mortals and Portals, on wherever you get your podcasts. You know, that classic saying. Just type in and it should pop up.
Purple logo. Heaps of fun. Strongly recommend it. Digsby's Crew for life.
For life.
Next week, Double Indemnity.
Yeah, I'm going to have a hard time saying that word this episode, that episode.
Double Indemnity.
Indemnity.
Yeah.
That's going to be
Double Jeopardy.
Yeah. Have you watched
Good luck to you guys on that one.
I've not.
I have not.
Have you seen it before, Zach?
What is it called? Double what?
Double
Indemnity.
Indemnity.
No.
It's from 1944.
Oh, definitely not then. Wow.
Yeah, it's a black and white film. I don't recognize anyone connected to this film, so this is going to be interesting.
This will be neat.
But yeah, that's our next film. Join us
way
next
back
week.
in time. If you've not seen Double Indemnity and would like to before you listen to next week's episode, link below where you can find that on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
And we get a kickback. Cha-ching.
Do it.
Oh,
check it out.
Food on Nelson's table.
Yeah, that's right. I'm real hungry.
My wife and I don't eat, so it just all goes to Nelson's table.
That's right. Yeah. Nelson Empty Pocket Fund.
Yeah.
It's like Nelson needs to stop coming over. He's eating all of our food.
Zach, thank you so much for coming on.
Yes.
We really appreciate it. We'd love to have you back someday. And this I may be being too forward, but if there's ever a time where you need a special guy, I would be interested in playing Dungeon or Pathfinder again. I'd be willing. If you ever need like
especially with a good GM.
If you want someone who doesn't know what they're doing to pick on to be the fall guy, I would be honored.
Jeff's a great comic foil.
Obviously, there's a little distance between us.
You guys need to get active on Patreon. You know, like you need to go on like one of their Patreon posts, and you need to like demand that Jeff plays a tabletop RPG, and then maybe we can work together.
I love that. I'm all for that. So yeah, love what you do, appreciate it, and we'd love to have you back again sometime. Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, guys. This was awesome. Really, really appreciate that you even reached out. Love what you guys are doing. I love your approach to critiquing movies and just like going through it that way from that different perspective. I think it's really, really cool. Keep it up.
Thank you, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Peace out, Girl Scout.
Later.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did.
If you found value in what we discussed today, please consider leaving us a rating and review. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.
If you have any feedback or suggestions, we would love to hear from you.
That's right, tell us why we're wrong.
If you want even more content and ways to engage with us and each other, check out our Patreon page.
By supporting us there, you'll get access to exclusive bonus content and help us continue to create high-quality episodes, as well as help pay for our future plans. Links to our social media, merchandise, and Patreon are in the show notes.